Well, I'm going to start this video like very different. This short film. I normally write an introduction, but I'm going to improvise it for this video because I live in a small town about 9 to 12 miles away from the capital city of Wales of Cardiff. And I support the football team, Cardiff City. I go shopping a lot in Cardiff. It's only a 20-minute train ride away. But one thing with doing all these YouTube videos, these short documentaries on historical people and historical moments, you do quite get interested in like the history of the nearest city, Cardiff. It has got a very fascinating city. Enters like the boot docks and all that, which we'll get into in this video. But if we rewind like 150 years ago into the Victorian era, Cardiff was a very, very like rough and dangerous place, even though it was booming due to the dock trade where the iron and coal was getting exported from Cardiff Bay or what was called Tiger Bay. It did have a bit of a shady reputation. Petty thieves, pickpocketing, and today's short documentary will be looking into one of these people who used to dominate Cardiff. He was the king of the rowdies, as he was known as. We are going to be looking at Mad Jack Matthews, the terror of the docks. So let's get into it.
Work, my dears, work!
Work? I knew there'd be a catch. What sort of work are we doing then?
How can I put this? We're pocket rummagers.
What?
Watch lifters. Wagged magpies with a beady eye on all that glitters.
The streets were a rough place, Cardiff Bay, or what it used to be known as Tiger Bay, a dockland area which crime was rife, and sectarian hate towards immigrants, especially towards the Norwegian or the Irish immigrants. On every street corner there were brothels, beer houses and gambling dens. Shady figures of all sorts lived down the newly constructed docks. We had many faces such as Swansea Dan, Billy Shortlegs and Alec the Devil. They all feared one man who spread fear across the waste-stricken streets of Cardiff. That was Mad Jack Matthews. A mysterious man with many people at the time even wondering why he went to South Wales, more specifically Cardiff. Mad Jack was born in the northern region of Ireland in 1819. Not Northern Ireland, because at the time Ireland was part of the United Kingdom as a unified country. Jack claimed that his mother was a kitchen maid who fell in love and had a sexual affair with an Irish nobleman. All this account is from Jack himself, and he is known for like embellishing his facts surrounding his life. But he is our only narrator, which is quite worrying because he's unreliable. The early years of Jack in Ireland saw him become a cutlery apprentice, like a seller of cutlery. He was uneducated and he could not read nor write due to his peasant upbringing. As he became a young adult, Jack decided to join the British Army. Normally, this would bring discipline into a lot of young men's lives, but army life wasn't for Jack. He didn't mix in well with it, and he was stationed in England, and the discipline of military standards just wasn't for Jack. He was fighting a lot of his generals, and he was being court-martialed many a times. He was locked up in prison at least 2 times for this, and the army had enough and dishonorably discharged him and sent him back into the world. In the 1840s, in his early 20s, Jack found himself in the docks of Cardiff. The docks at the time were newly constructed by John Crichton Stewart, who was the second Lord of Bute. It was built to transport the coal and Merthyr iron across the world. Job opportunities were good in this area, like they were really good. People were coming across the world to work in Cardiff. and Jack did find himself a job in Cardiff. In 1840, he was working as a razor and scissors sharpener. At the time, he was age 21. He was over 6 feet tall, a built, muscular figure with messy ginger hair. He was seen by many locals walking home from work, singing in the Irish accent that he had, razors to grind and scissors to grind. Jack would eventually need to find other ways to survive, like a lot of people who lived in the peasant lifestyle at the time. Pickpocketing was a popular method of stealing during the Victorian era, sorry, and Matthews had a good sleight of hand and was very good at deceiving people and tricking them while they were being robbed. Becoming now notorious, Jack started to organise a network of pickpocketing gangs. Swansea Dan and Ned Llewellyn became associates of Jack. They would pickpocket on the behalf of Jack and bring goods to Matthews. Jack will resemble very much a character that you all know, and we all know very well. Fagin from Oliver Twist, which was created by Charles Dickens. Fagin is one of the antagonists in Oliver Twist, the leader of a child pickpocketing gang. He uses manipulation skills to coerce the children and Oliver into pickpocketing the rich of London. Fagin would then fence them for his own profit. He was a cruel, vile, lonesome, and greedy man. And you can make the comparisons to Jack and Fagin. Both love illegal gambling, drinkers, and master manipulators. Fagin, in the story, was hanged for his involvement in the murder of Nancy. Jack didn't see that fate because he wasn't involved in any murders. So his crimes were just saw more as minor. But his own pickpocketing gang were effective in bringing stolen goods to Jack. They would turn violent though, but not Jack. They would start targeting young girls making their way home. A gang would attack these girls by forcing them onto the ground and start kicking them brutally. It was reported in the Merthyr and Cardiff Guardian in 1847, kick and knock the poor girls about, as the boys would a football. These were horrible people. It wasn't known whether Jack was involved, but Jack did have history of being violent towards women. Jack did get married to a lady called Ellen. The years of marriage was unknown, but Jack caused absolute hell for her. He would attack her pretty much daily at home and would shockingly do it in public as well, because this man generally didn't care. He once attacked Ellen in a pub, which ended up in being a fight. The police were notified and they arrived on the scene to break up the couple. All three police officers didn't expect to find out what would befall them. In an attempt to break up Jack and Ellen, they went for Jack as he was the most violent. They started to hit Jack with their batons, but it was doing no damage to him. It angered him even more, to be precise. He would take all three police officers on, and he would knock them all out. And you could see what would happen. Jack would get arrested, but the people of Cardiff now know that he was a good fighter. He was a man not to be messed with. He would make his first court appearance in Cardiff at the time. It was shocking, but the trial did favour Jack from the start, with Ellen testifying in his favour, bear in mind, claiming that Jack had a bad reaction from one of the officers touching her breast in the melee, which saw Jack walk free. It would be a regular thing, Jack walking free, so you just will expect more in this story. With fencing being very successful for Jack, he would eventually become a fully fledged gangster as his legal activities just grew bigger with him, and he would become a pimp. In the Victorian era, mainly in deprived areas, you will find prostitution being the main income for women. Cardiff and Tiger Bay area was tough for a lot of women, and they did have to resort to prostitution in order just to survive, just basic living. Even if they got families, it was a way of feeding their families and getting food on the table. And a lot of these women would work for Jack, and he saw the opportunity in this. He decided to control the women and take a cut from their earnings. But Jack was savvier than just simply pimping out these women to men. Cardiff Docks was the biggest and one of the most important docks at the time, and it was these sailors coming from across the world, from like Norway, America, France, Germany, Africa, and these sailors, obviously at the sea for a very long time, were deprived of sex, and they were quite willing to pay for the ladies of the night of Cardiff. Jack would open illegal drinking dens at the front. He would allow the sailors to get drunk and go off upstairs with the women under his thumb in a nearby lodging. Sailors and the women would have sex, as you would guess, because they're paying for it. And when the sailors would pass out or fall asleep, the women would steal absolutely everything from them. I mean, they would steal absolutely everything that they owned, and it wasn't pretty for them, to say the least.
Look after him, Dodger.
The police would have a different idea. They wanted to break Jack's control over prostitution in the area. So they decided to go for Jack in like the most violent way they could possibly to stop him. Several police officers saw Jack walking down the street and attacked him late one night. They beat him with their truncheons to the point where he was left on the floor, bloody, on the cobblestones. Instead of like being defeated like a normal person would, he was covered in blood and got up with a crazy look in his eye, like nothing has happened. And other police officers were like in fear of him. He snatched one of their truncheons and snapped it. Without fear taking completely over, they all fled. The police fled, and Mad Jack just continued, as you would guess. Cardiff at the time of Mad Jack was rough, to say the least. Whitmore Lane and Charlotte Street were some of the poorest and dangerous areas in the city. Two pubs stood in the area: the Golden Cross, which still stands on the corner of Whitmore Lane, now Custom House Street, and the Spread Eagle, which was the pub owned by Jack. More court appearances saw Jack stand trial, with most notably a raid on 3 houses in Charlotte Street. They seized bottles of illegal bootlegged alcohol. As usual, Jack did get away with it and walked out of the courthouse as a free man. Cardiff Council, though, did have enough of him and the trouble which he caused, and all the continuing trouble on Whitmore Lane and Charlotte Street. But they would decide to swipe the streets from the map. But they wanted to do more than that, though. They wanted to flatten the streets and build new, basically. They just wanted to regenerate Cardiff. Jack was worried that it would ruin his empire, his criminal empire, so he did take a bit out of the Tommy Shelby in Peaky Blinders and decided to become a politician. This is where like the story gets a bit goofy now. This is where it gets a bit crazy. Jack decided to run for a position in Cardiff Council, but during this time, Jack actually got fined, and in a show of like how much he did actually care about the fine, he pushed a wheelbarrow containing 4,800 farthings to the steps of the town hall for tipping out and yelling, "There's your bloody money." Yeah, so that was Jack, like through and through. And his election campaign saw him verbally attack councillors, calling them lazy and corrupt, and vowed to oppose them in every way possible. Yeah, he's not wrong. It's still the same now. But he would literally get sued he gets sued £1 because during like one of his campaign speeches, he like hired a meeting room and didn't even pay him. So he got sued £1. And Jack would see himself as a champion of the people for the social and the working class. He was popular with people fresh out of prison and people who were involved in petty crime. But he didn't win his political seat, and the fate of Whitmore Lane and Charlotte Street were sealed because the Cardiff Improvement Act of 1875 was passed and the two streets were flattened. Custom House Street was built with the Golden Cross pub surviving to this day. The Spread Eagle was gone, but Jack was paid handsomely for vacating the area. He was paid £2,400 along with other residents. But this is where we start seeing like his life go pretty much downhill. His wife Ellen would pass away at the age of 35, and to cope with this, Jack found religion. It seemed like he left his criminal side behind him. His daughter would fly the nets and leave home and start dating a circus performer. Not really much is known what happened after that with her. While his son would commit suicide by shooting himself. But things would get even sadder for Jack because he had a grandson who was born disabled, and Jack very much loved him so much and cared for him. But he would end up passing away, and then you would see Jack just become a shell of himself, the man he used to be. But he would remarry a brothel worker named Elizabeth, who would pass away before him as well. She was buried at Cathay Cemetery next to his grandson. But Jack would finally find peace in his later life as he passed away in 1888, and he was buried with Elizabeth. So that is the story of Mad Jack Matthews, which I find fascinating. I did cover it briefly in my like Razor Gangs Cardiff video, and I have something I wanted to come back to more because he was a very, very fascinating character. Like Jack might have been the king of the rowdies who decided to like cause terror with his petty crime sprees in his underworld. A tough guy who fought the law and 9 times out of 10 beat him. He did. He beat him. Apart from like minor fines, which technically at the same time we would consider as wins. But it's one thing like people can forget about Jack is that he was human at the end of the day. He was a person who did what he had to do to survive. Even though he was violent and brutish, his later life would see ultimately a sad ending, and he was the shell of the man he used to be. We need to forget that he's not just Mad Jack Matthews. He was John Matthews. He was born in Ireland. He was once a member of the British Army. He was once a cutlery seller. He was a man at the end of the day. A man who would have heartbreak, but lived one hell of a life. Thank you for watching today's short documentary. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.